Do you want a wealthy retirement without worrying about money? Welcome to Retire in Texas, where you will discover how to enjoy your faith, your family, and your freedom in the state of Texas. And now, here's your host, financial advisor, author, and all-around good Texan, Daryl Lyons.
Hey, this is Daryl Lyons, and you're listening to Retire in Texas. Thanks for tuning in. I have to make sure I give you our legal disclosure, and this information is intended for specifically a general audience. And so any tax or legal or specific investment advice, it's not intended for this show. So be sure to see your specialist to get the information that you need. Now, with all that being said, I want to make sure that you know that you can text the word Texas to the number 74868. That's Texas to 74868. We'll have one of our advisors connect with you. It's really a 15-minute, no cost, no threat conversation to talk about money. Okay. So I'm excited today because I have a friend who was my enemy. Now he's my friend. Now, are you my enemy today or my friend?
When are we ever enemies, guy? What do you mean?
I'm just messing with you, man. No, we've always been friends. And
oh man,
going back to St. Mary's University undergraduate days. So we have a long history of hanging out and just fellowshipping. You're a dear friend, Nico. So I'm honored to have you here.
Very mutual, Daddy. Thank you for having me on.
So there's a lot to cover in 20 minutes. We're not going to be able to get to all of it. First off, you do have a Netflix appearance. What is it? A show, right?
It's not our show. It was a program it's called I Am a Killer.
Yeah.
So it started off in Europe. There's 2 seasons. And so one of the seasons, season 1, episode 2 is specifically on my brother's murder, as you know, Daryl.
Yeah.
And so my brother in 1996, August 15th, to be specific, was taken from us in a carjacking at my parents' house. We were inside. We walked out minutes later. I think they were intrigued by the fact that, number one, they were doing this series where they're following people that are on death row or that were on death row, but they wanted to tell the backstory. And they were intrigued. At the time, I was serving in San Antonio. We call it Bexar County. I'm not sure how far your audience is, if it's local or
That's good. Yeah.
In Bexar County, as the district attorney, I was the elected district attorney, and they were under the false impression that I could actually do something to get the driver, not the shooter. The driver also got the death penalty along with the shooter in my brother's situation. The governor at the time commuted the sentence, reduced it from death to life. And life back then was a mandatory 40 years. Now today, under the current law, it's life, meaning that you will leave this earth from prison. But back then it's mandatory 40 years. So there's a whole story behind that, Daryl. I know that's not the subject of our talk today about that journey, but that's what this show is about. And there was a lot of prayer and discernment and consideration that I had to look at before I said yes, because I thought it was another organization from Europe. I mean, I vetted them out for weeks and a number of phone calls and conversations with them. And it was a leap of faith, man. I just prayed about it, and they gave me assurances that it was not going to be a one-sided story. And I think they honored it for the most part. You know, it's 55 minutes. There's only so much you can put in there. They were here for months doing research. And it's pretty in-depth. You've seen it. Many people have, but it was interesting. And I'm glad it's out there because I think it gives a full story. There's a lot of misinformation around that situation and these individuals involved in my brother's murder. But yeah, so it's not my show. We are one of the episodes within a 2-series show.
Called what again?
I Am a Killer. That's the name of the show.
Did you also have some screen time with vaccinations? What was that? Was that on Netflix also?
No, that was on another. It's called Vaxxed, VAXXED. It's the docu-series.
Yeah.
We were in the second one, my wife and I. But the thing that caused the global stir, and I think that's what you're alluding to, was when I was district attorney, I was sitting in my office, not this one, when I was actually in office. And we have a son, for those that don't know, on the spectrum of autism.
Uh-huh.
And he was not born that way. And so I made the controversial statement.
And at the time, now it
was very controversial.
Yeah.
Some people it still is, but I said,
yeah,
I'm Nico LaHood. I'm San Antonio district attorney, something like that. You can find it on YouTube. And I'm here to say that vaccines can and do cause autism. That literal 10-second blurb went global. And of course, the backlash from certain organizations and people or whatever. But hey, man, I mean, I owe it to my son not to be scared and to tell his story. He is moderate on the spectrum, Daryl. You've seen him, you know him.
Yeah.
And he's not totally verbal. He says words, not phrases. My wife doesn't like me to say nonverbal because as the Lord leads and anything can happen. So I don't want to speak that over him. But He doesn't communicate the way we do. But and he stamps this sensory integration stuff, but he is moderate versus severe and then high functioning. He's kind of in the middle. And so it's been a labor of love. It's challenging with a child on the spectrum, as we've talked about before. But man, our son, Michael, has taught my wife and I, and let me speak for me because I'm a flawed individual wrapped in this crap called flesh. But I love Jesus. I've submitted my life to him. But Michael, other than Christ and my biblical teachings and studying, has been the greatest teacher in my life. I am a better human being. I'm a better man. I'm a better husband. I think I was a better district attorney. I'm a better lawyer. Everything because of not only Christ, but of Michael.
So we bounced around real quick. I threw our audience into the fire here, which is cool. But I wanted to tease them out to help them capture the essence of who you are a little bit with this Netflix series along with Vaxxed that were a couple of points of publicity. But let's take us back a little bit. You're San Antonio native, right? You had how many brothers and sisters growing up?
I was the middle. I am the middle of 3 boys.
Okay. Yeah. And then what did your parents do?
My pop is retired now. He's 85 years old. He's still with us, thank God, but he was a lawyer. Mm-hmm. He served in the Army, 2 years active, 22 years, I think, reserve. He retired as a light bird, lieutenant colonel.
Yeah.
And my mom both worked harder than anybody. She was a housewife and she was a homemaker, and she raised us and of course provided for us and nurtured us. And so they're both still with us on this side of heaven.
Yeah, that's actually amazing. So would you describe it kind of a middle class?
It was upper middle class, maybe. My mom grew up on the south side, though. My pop on the west side. So they did not come from much. My pop is first generation here.
Real quick, those that aren't listening in San Antonio, the south side and the west side and the east side and the north side in San Antonio are very distinct. And you might even think, well, the south side and west side are similar because of the race. You think of the east side, you kind of think of an African-American community. But the south side and west side, even though they are predominantly Hispanic, generally lower income, higher teenage pregnancy, higher crime. We know all that, but they are distinct in their culture. So, West Sider and a South Sider are different people.
Yeah, they are. I mean, a lot of traditional values. I mean, things are changing. Obviously, there's a struggle in that world, and we can do another podcast just on that. Very vocal about that and advocacy. But yes, very traditional families, a lot of faith, family, fellowship, friendship, a lot. And so, but lower income. My mom came from very, 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 very modest means. My pop was a first generation Lebanese, American, but Lebanese descent. Okay. His daddy came over from Lebanon, my grandpa, and got stuck here during the war. And then my pop, and then they grew a family here, and they started selling produce before HEB. And
okay. We've got to chat about this offline because my grandparents, we could trace it back, and I bet they bumped around in that part of the city of San Antonio. But your mom was Hispanic, your dad was Lebanese, right?
They still are. Just in case you forgot.
I think it's really cool that they're alive. That's a blessing. That is a blessing.
The blessing. When Mike passed, again, this is another podcast. I was angry at God. I was angry at the world. I held God in contempt, but I took it out on everybody else. But I remember in my confusion and loss, I was stuck in the prison of unforgiveness. I remember having a conversation with God, not in submission, in defiance. But I did say that I remember, and I don't remember exactly when or what, but it was said, if you let me practice law with my pop, and if you let my parents see their grandchildren, I'll serve you for the rest of my life. Yeah. And I will tell you, I practiced law with my pop for 6 years before he took the bench, because one of the things in his resume is he was a county court judge. And so he took the bench, but for 6 years, I saw him every day, saw every one of my jury trials, all that stuff. And they've seen now, we have 4 children. My brother Mark has 4 children. So they've seen 8 of their grandchildren. So God has over-delivered as he always does. So I kept my word. I've served him for many years now.
Showing you favor in your children and your children's children. Now, have you always had a strong faith like this, or did it develop at a certain point in your life?
No, I definitely didn't live, because part of my testimony also, I don't know if you want to get into this, is when I was young and stupid, I was arrested for selling drugs, as you know. This. Yeah. My testimony, I've done prison ministry, halfway house ministry. I have a passion for men and that are lost and do not walk in their biblical manhood. And families, the nuclear family is critical to me and to God and to, I think, to our society. But that's part of my journey also, going through that experience. And so I was not always walking with the Lord. I grew up denominationally Catholic, had no relationship. And as I've often said, is rules without relationship breeds rebellion. I capitalize on it.
Why don't you say that again?
Rules without relationship breeds rebellion.
Yeah. There you go.
And I was poster boy for the rebellion part. And so I love the before and after, the BC.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah.
Before Christ versus after. And so that's why I'm so passionate about our faith and our worldview, because it's not goofy, it's not kooky. I'm an evidence guy. It's very evidence driven because I needed it. When I tripped over Jesus, I always tell people, because I wasn't looking for him, I wanted to know who I tripped over. And so I did a very deep dive into the credibility of Christianity versus other worldviews.
So I may get to that, I may not, because I want to stick to your life story, even though I'd love to talk about that. And I'm really proud that you're leading a church. Now, you're not leading a church, but you've been leading a body of men, a group of men, which the church is the body of Christ.
Sure.
And so you've been leading a group of men for how many years now? That range from 20 to 50 any given weekday?
80.
Yeah.
We've had everyone from former bikers to former Aryan Brotherhood to banditos, you name it, doctors, lawyers, carpenters, AC techs, everything, Uber drivers. So we're on our 13th year. Every week I facilitate a Bible study for men.
It's really fascinating because there's many churches that have been intentional about building steeples that haven't sustained the momentum that you've had. And you've just been a faithful steward, not saying, okay, I don't need 100. Whoever shows up this week, I'm good.
1 or 1 million, I tell people you're going to get the same message. Now, of course, it's a raw message. You know me. I just believe that our faith needs to be authentic.
Sure.
I believe you have to work really hard to make that collection of books, that library of books that we call the Bible, those 66 books, boring. And they're anything but PG and G rated because they're dealing with people wrapped in flesh, dealing with life and our flawed and God's got to work all that out. And so it's not pretty. And so if I expect these men to actually live out this worldview and put on the lenses of the Bible and not take them off or take them off as little as possible, then I need to make sure that the Bible makes sense to them and that God's word makes sense to them. And it's not something that they have to apply. It's something that they have this renewed mind, Romans 12:2. And so we have raw conversations. And so it's not a Bible study just for anybody.
Yeah, I understand. So just to provide clarity, do you still do the R-rated Christianity podcast?
We do.
Okay, so that podcast has a lot of colorful language in it.
I don't drop F-bombs because I know my audience and I understand what Ephesians 4:29 says to consider the audience. And when I'm behind a pulpit, and I've had the pleasure of talking in many churches. I just did this last weekend at CBC. And of course, I do it different. I understand my audience, but it does have some language, some slang words, so to speak. It's just I want people to know that we're raw, we're real. That's what the R stands for.
Yeah.
But ultimately, that raw and real conversation needs to drive someone to a redemptive relationship with a first century Jew named Jesus. And that changes everything at that point.
Yeah. And then the second platform, it's really the third. I don't know how many platforms you have to be able to share your love of Christ, but there's a lot of different platforms. And you have the Bible study, you have R-rated Christianity, and then you also have Sidebar. So tell the audience what Sidebar is.
When I got out of office and I was back in private practice, I was looking to market, because whether people think you're good or not good at what you do, if no one knows how to find you, then you're the best hidden thing out there, whatever you're selling or doing. So I started working on marketing. One of the things we did was we used radio at one point, and part of the package was, I remember the lady, the vice president, said, Nico, I love our conversations because you know me, you don't have to prompt me too much where I talk about life and opinions and biblical understanding Christ. And it was just real. And she goes, I love it. It makes sense. We should try to put something in. You should do a radio show and you sponsor it. LaHood Norton Law Group sponsors it. But then, so it's your hour and you do this, you can do whatever you want, talk about whatever you want. Maybe. So long story short, we put it in there. It quickly turned from a way to market the law firm to just a current events, a way of handling whatever's happening. We handle current events. I brought on a dear friend of mine who has joined me and partnered with me in ministry in apologetics. For those that don't know what apologetics, it comes from the Greek word apologia, to give an answer, a defense, why you believe in whatever you believe in. And so we have an apologetics ministry, so to speak, in defending the Christian ideology and the biblical ideology. And so George came on because he's a chemist by trade. He's a scientist, a scholar. I mean, he worked for a pharmaceutical company, believe it or not. There's a long story behind that. And I brought him on as an expert, so to speak, to talk about studies and personal protection equipment and vaccines and viral loads and bacterial loads and study. And then he got stuck. So he's been with us for 2 years now. Karen and I, our co-host, have been doing it for the first year by ourselves. George jumped on about 2 years ago, and we've been doing this for over 3 years now. And it's grown into something where we just challenge people to critically think, Daryl, meaning spar with ideas in your mind. Don't just be a sheep. Have your own thoughts. Think about it. Challenge. Ask questions. We're huge. We hate censorship. And that's a strong word. I do hate censorship. I don't use that lightly. And we just encourage people to think, and whatever conclusion you come to, you should be able to defend why you're there. So we really push people on the why.
So I kind of went a couple different directions here, but very intentional. And the show is Retire in Texas. We have a lot of people that listen to the show all around the country, and it's amazing how many people tell me they're listening now. And that's encouraging. I want to thank those that are listening. I want to encourage you to reach out to me. You can send me an email, tell me what you want to hear, give me feedback, Daryl@paxfg.com. But the reason I mentioned that is because I do want to shift to the purpose of the show, which is Retire in Texas. You retired as a district attorney. Now I'm saying retired. The biblical idea of retirement really doesn't exist. There's references and inferences to retirement, but you effectively retired from a public service job. So let's talk about that specifically. In the district attorney role, how long were you there? And generally, do you get paid a lot of money to do that?
Well, it depends on what you define as a lot of money, because everybody's like, when people say, like,
sure,
you healthy? Yeah. I eat healthy. What does that mean? Right?
Yeah.
And they don't. So a lot of money, it got decent money for a public servant, but not what in the potential in private practice.
Yeah, that's what I was thinking. Relative to your private practice potential. Yeah.
No, and then there's no write-offs because you're not in a business, you're in service. You don't write off anything. So even the benefits, the appropriate tax benefits of writing off your expenses,
sure,
in a business, you don't get as a public servant. So all that adds up too. You'd be surprised. No, it wasn't anywhere close to what you can do in private practice.
And how long were you doing the district attorney?
4 years. I was elected 4 years. I ran the time before, it didn't work out. I mean, you're talking about, former drug dealer, and they came after me, and get the story of redemption the first time. But it was kind of me, letting people know. I mean, I was known in this community, but not that. In Bexar County is a county. And I didn't think I was going to run again. And then, of course, the Lord called me off the bench, and so I did it, and then we were successful. And I'm very proud of the work that we did in office for those 4 years.
What were you most proud of? Is there anything specific?
Yeah, the culture. I could give you Janine Jones' case. Here's a woman that has been suspected of over 60 to 65 baby deaths. She was convicted in Kerrville. She was of a baby death, was given 30 years back then. And then she was convicted here of injury to a child causing serious bodily injury. The baby did not pass away, thank God. But the judge mistakenly ran them concurrent. So she was going to get out because of old laws when it comes to parole. She was getting out. 2 DAs before me said, there's nothing we can do. There's an old case. She's getting out. So while I was in office, we have her phone records. She was making plans on how she was going to get out. When I was campaigning, I said, look, I don't know what can be done. I haven't seen the evidence, and it's a 30-year-old case. But I promise you we'll do everything we can to make sure that woman stays behind bars and meets the Lord from prison. And we did that. I assigned it to now one of my law partners, Jason Goss, one of the best lawyers I've ever worked with on either side of the bar. And he took 54 boxes home, and he was a court chief, and he did this on the side. We came back after thorough investigation and putting a team on it. It was 5 new murder indictments. And the families were in tears. It was bittersweet. So that's a case I can tell you.
Yeah.
But overall, the culture, people, I believe, enjoyed serving the public. They enjoyed seeking justice. They took pride in their work and didn't micromanage people. There was 500 people in that office, 200 lawyers. That was the law firm that I was running at the time, or leading. And I led by example, I hope to believe. And so I set the culture of justice. And matter of fact, you can't see it. Well, there you can. I was in my office back there. I keep it here. It says, do what's right, not what's easy.
Yeah.
Politically correct. We were seeking justice, and what we're doing best for the community and the person accused. And we have to, put all that together. It's a very elusive concept, that concept of justice.
Tell me about how you were able to transition. Just keep it general, because I don't need to know any specifics on financially transition and managing your identity. You were a district attorney. Now you're going to go back into private practice. How did you manage both of those two things?
I'll do the identity first, because my identity, and I know this is such a Christianese phrase, right? I get it, but it was in Christ. I mean, so I was not the DA. I happened to be the DA. That's a difference. Many people, when they run for office, they get that robe syndrome, that senator syndrome, that congresswoman syndrome, that DA syndrome, that judge. I think the Lord prepared me going into it. I said, look, I am a follower of Jesus Christ. I'm the Son of God. I'm an American. I'm a husband. I'm a daddy. I happen to be the district attorney of Lebanese Mexican descent. That's the order of importance. And so that was the way I lived my life. That's the way I led the office. And so it wasn't about my identity as I transitioned out at all. For me, at least. For a lot of people, I know it is, but for me, it wasn't.
Sure.
But I went through a lot of crap before that to kind of prepare me for that, as the Lord does what he does. So that was one thing. Financially, I was so focused on that I did not count the cost going into office. When people go into office from private world, I tell them, what debt do you have? Where's your budget? What does the position pay? What were your write-offs that you're used to? What do you think you have to do now? Do you like vacation? How are you going to plan for that? Are you going to do without it? What are you going to do? It's just counting the cost, as Luke says, right? And so I didn't do that. So when I got out of office, I was in tremendous debt. But as you and I know, I stumbled across Dave Ramsey. I had heard of him, but I kind of wrote him off because I think years ago, I'm just trying to be transparent and honest, if I can remember, I must have run into him, meaning on like a video while he was on one of his famous rants. You're stupid. You're freaking stupid. You know, you're stupid.
Sell the car.
Yeah, stupid. 500, so freaking stupid. And I said, first of all, you don't want to say freaking. Okay, number two, and I just said, man, this guy's goofy. I said, forget about it. I don't want to listen to this guy. Okay, debt free. I got it. Man, there's so much wisdom in what he teaches. And so this time around, a buddy of mine talked about him. I said, I'm going to do it. So Davi and I did a course that we saw at my friend's house on video. It was X amount of weeks. We started applying the baby steps and then, just working from there. And there was an old property. We had 2 properties at the time and I was planning and strategizing. And so it was an interesting, painful process at times, but it was a blessing in the end. So, it was a good result.
2 more questions, and I hate that we have to cut it short, but what does the next chapter look like for you, 5-10 years?
Hopefully be on this side of heaven. Number one, can't do anything if you're not. I know I'm going to heaven. I just don't want to go today. That's why I'm so, as you know,
you take care of your body.
The way I eat.
I still think you need more sleep, but that's just.
Well, I'm not going to argue that one. I'm working on that one, but you're right. I'm going to work on that one. But
hey, you take care of your body. I don't know. You've got to be in the top 5 of, and I know a lot of people that are disciplined that take care of their body. So you inspire me to make sure that I'm taking care of my body.
I just turned 50 3 weeks ago.
Yeah.
And so it matters to me. And if God willing, I want 40 more years because I do. 90 is a good age to me. But I want to be a healthy 90, not a pain for anybody. So I'm just showing into my health as an act of worship. That's the way I look at it.
Yep. Love it.
And there's a long story behind that for another time. So the next year, I want to grow the firm. I do believe that there's public services in the next 10 years. I don't know what it's going to look like. I do not believe, and I'm always going to be obedient. I do not believe it will mean shutting down my law practice. So I don't believe there will be any position that I would be interested in that would mean I have to shut down my law practice. Because again, this time we've been blessed and we have 6 lawyers, 7 with David of counsel. I love working with the people. All of us used to be high-level prosecutors, which makes it unique. But it's a big responsibility. I have to think about other families too. It's not just about me. Mm-hmm. And so, God willing, grow the firm. I'd like 3 more lawyers and getting into a couple of different areas of law, even though we specialize in criminal trial work, criminal defense, state and federal. But ministry, Daryl, you know my heart. My heart is men and marriages and kids, young people. The millennial group is 4% has a biblical worldview. I mean, the statistics are horrific, even for adults, by the way.
Wait till God redeems that.
Well, I mean, but we can't sit around. I mean, he's not Santa Claus. I got to work. And so we're going to go out there and do our part. Matthew 28:19 is the specific call on us, a duty to go out and make disciples of all men, teaching them to obey all that I've commanded, right? So I got to do that in a practical way, in a realistic way, and an uncompromising way. It's hard. How do you uncompromising, but then also be practical? And I always tell people, truth without grace comes across harsh, but grace without truth is deception. And the only way you merge the two is through the Holy Spirit and just a wise study and practice on how you handle it. So I believe that's one of my strengths. And so I just really, if I could talk to people full time, it'd be great. We're working on a book, as you know, hopefully out by the end of this year or early next year, called R-Rated Christianity. Just couldn't get away from the title. It's good. It really reflects my life and my journey with Jesus. And I don't know. So I'm just going to be obedient. I'm really focused on being obedient. So whether that means some type of position that means I can serve, but also keep my firm, of course, never losing focus on my wife. I married up. She's way too good for me. And I'm honored to be her husband. And then 4 children. Of course, Michael needs special attention at times because he's on the spectrum. So there's a lot going on. So that's why I don't sleep. But, there's plenty of time to be with Jesus later on.
There'll be an opportunity. I know the Lord is just orchestrating things in the background, whether it's public service or public profile, but it'll be one of the 2, I'm sure.
As the Lord leads, as I always say, I just want to be obedient. I don't want it to be about me. I always direct people back to Christ, and I want to brag on him. And Scripture says that in Galatians, but I just want to brag about him. I want to show people that following Jesus, you don't have to be some kooky weirdo. Man, he hung around a bunch of raw people, and there's a real life to live abundantly if we're following Jesus.
Last question. What's your favorite salsa?
I mean, I like spicy stuff. So I don't like green salsas. I like a tomato-based salsa. And then my wife is from Mexico. So she's from a state called Sinaloa, a town called Los Mochis. And so when I said pico de gallo, when we first started dating almost 17 years ago, she thinks of that's salsa fresca. And I said, no, that's pico de gallo here. Now, pico de gallo, where they're from, has fruit and mangoes. And so it's a different definition. See, it depends on what your definitions are. Back to definitions, brother. I like a tomato-based one.
Yeah, very cool. Hey, look, I love you like a brother, and we've enjoyed doing life. We text each other almost every other day, and sometimes it's just banter and sometimes it's real stuff. So I appreciate you taking time out and jumping on the show, and we'll have to do it again.
Anytime, brother. God bless you, and God bless your audience.
Thank you very much. And thanks again for staying to the end. Retire in Texas. Again, if you need to speak to an advisor, text 74868 and just put in the text Texas. And then remember, think long term. Have a great day.
This is thepodcastfactory.com.